Hello there, and welcome back to the podcast of Wednesday's Child. It's been a really long while, hasn't it? So, just in case you needed a refresher, my name's Debbie Watson. I'm the founder of Wednesday's Child, and I am one of your hosts on this podcast where we talk about all things eating disorders and many, many things besides. And my co host is the wonderful Sarah Ledger, and she's back with me today. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
Hiya, Debbie. Hi, I'm good, thank you. I was actually thinking, what do I describe myself as? But I'm now officially a director of
Oh,
a Wednesday's Child,
you
so
are
I can call myself
indeed.
that now, can't
Yeah,
I?
you
Which is
absolutely
lovely.
can. So not only a co-host on the podcast, but you're also a director, which kind of brings us on to, I suppose, two aspects of what we were going to talk about today. There's some changes afoot, and we're not exactly going to use today's podcast to reveal all of that, but certainly we've had a breather. We've had some time. We've thought a lot about what's missing in the space, what we can do to bring to the community around eating disorder support. So there are going to be some interesting things coming your way over the next months or so. So please do stay interacting with us. And I think that the underlying theme of this episode that we're returning on would be stay in touch. Let us know what you most enjoy about sticking us, in your headphones when you get to listen to us. And what is it that we bring to your thoughts about eating disorders, your situation with your own recovery, to supporting someone else? What is it we say and do or could do more of that would help you? So please interact with this podcast. It's lovely to know that we happen to infiltrate your ears at different times, whether you're out on a walk or kind of laying in bed listening to us. That's great. It's really great that you're there. But this is two-way. So you at any time you've only got to kind of interact with us on social media or drop us an email. So just to give you that at the top of the program, and I'll give it to you later as well. That's hello@wednesdayschild.co.uk. So I guess what we should start by doing, Sarah, is just kind of letting everyone know where we've been. So your life is far more interesting than mine. You've become a puppy mum.
Oh, goodness me. I'm surrounded by wee and poo, Debbie, is what I am at the moment. I think we've kind of been living some of the things that we talk about on this podcast in that sense of taking a pause and having a breath
Yeah.
and kind of reconnecting and reconfiguring slightly. And in that time, neither of us have done anything hugely monumental. I'll get to the puppies in a moment. But I do think that that period of just space has been really, really helpful for us both, actually, in many ways. So that's my first thing, I suppose, is where we've been. We've actually just been taking some breathing space.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of message of the moment is think about your busyness. I always,
Yeah.
feel concerned when people say to me, "Oh, but I'm just so busy, just so busy." And that's why their recovery doesn't really have a priority at the moment because I'm a mum, because I'm a student, because I've got this job that I'm doing at my house, I'm dealing with my own parents, whatever it might be. We all get busy. So you're right. And I think one thing that perhaps when you're in the thick of an eating disorder, guilt and that sense of needing to be productive is a real problem, and it really can harm recovery. And even as far on as you and I are in terms of what we experienced ourselves, it is so important every now and then to say, when was the last time I paused? When was
Yeah.
the time I served myself?
And everything any expert out there in a million different walks of life will tell you that the second that you feel things are running away or that you're being a little bit indecisive because there's so many decisions to make, that actually the best thing to do is just to pause and just breathe and just to wait and not necessarily make a decision or do an action until you've given yourself that chance to have a little
Yeah,
bit of space.
yeah.
Which is exactly what I didn't do when it came to the puppies. So Meg and Lenny, my two Cocker Spaniels, as people that listen and have followed us for a while will have heard of and met and seen and listened to, no doubt. They had babies 4 weeks ago. So it was only a small litter, so we've got four. We're calling them Bert, Ernie, White Stripe, and Maggie. And they are beautiful. But the happy, sad thing is people are starting to come and have a look to take them home. So how I'm
Oh,
ever going to do that is just beyond me. But hey ho, it is what it is, and that's what's supposed to happen, I suppose, isn't it? You're supposed to be temporary foster mum or granny, as I am, and then give them up. So it'll be lovely.
So you say visits have been happening already, have they? People coming in having a look.
Yeah, so Ernie has he's got his Forever Home signed up, and I think we've got someone coming round this evening to have a look. I'm going to hide the girl though, so if anyone's listening to this, and I've talked about Maggie, she actually doesn't exist because I'm going to hopefully convince James and Amy that we'll keep her. The chances of that are highly, highly unlikely. But I figure if I just keep like hiding it, or maybe if I like cover in poo or something and pretend that she's just really naughty, then no one will want her. And then we'll have to
Okay,
keep her.
I like your theory. It's a bit devious, but it might work.
But yes, so we'll see. Maybe the next podcast we have, they'll all have their forever homes. Who knows?
Oh, that's amazing. I think Sarah, you should definitely share some pictures with us that we can put on the Wednesday's Child socials.
Definitely, definitely, I will do that.
There's a photo caption competition somewhere in there, I'm sure.
Oh, with some of the craziness they get up to, there 100% is. But that's been I suppose, the biggest development and change for me since we last did an episode.
Oh, that's amazing. So this time of year, I always think it's a weird time, isn't it? So summer holidays, and regardless of whether you are someone that's caught up in the academic cycle because you have children going to school, or you yourself are in a learning cycle related to university and school, it's a bit of a kind of getting ready for the next step, isn't it? And a next phase. Do you find yourself looking at this time of year as an opportunity to, do that checking in and thinking about, how do I push myself forward? What do I change? Is there a new chapter for me?
I actually, I actually think for me, without doubt, me, and for many people, actually, this is a more significant time of year for that than January is.
Mm,
Um, obviously, when you've got a family and you've got children that are at school, and you all know that I run a teacher training and literacy company, so we're all totally determined by the academic year. But I think that this is a huge period of transition and change and reflection, and definitely this idea of like that, like you just said, the momentum, the moving on to a next phase. Especially because if you do have children at home or you're a student, you are literally moving on to your predisposed, pre-designed next phase,
yeah.
i.e., you're going to university, you're going into year 13 rather than year 12 or whatever it is. So I think it's a huge transitional point, August.
And I listen to a lot of the kind of news and conversations around this time of year, and I do have, when I think about it from the context of eating disorders, and perhaps this is entirely selfish and it's born out of the kind of prism of my own experiences of at the period at which I first experienced an eating disorder, I get concerned about the fever pitch with which people talk about the need for somebody to make sure they go to university. They must have this new chapter. They must go in this direction. I think it's really important that people don't get swept up in feeling they need to follow the herd almost at this time of year. And I would wager there are probably plenty of people out there listening to a podcast like this who have suffered ill health, know that they're not at perhaps tip-top performance, in terms of emotional and mental health, and might be feeling that they need to transition into university or go on to a next step of a ladder that perhaps they're less comfortable with. Do you think that's something that almost an eating disorder can prevent you from feeling you have a right and an opportunity to make those decisions?
Yeah, and or the ability to, maybe, because you're in such a fog and such everything's so confusing anyway, that actually kind of just going along with the pattern of things as it's supposed to be, in
Mm,
one sense, kind of takes a decision out of it. I think it's just really, really important to think that, like, we weren't designed as human beings to do all these things at these particular ages and milestones, and our
yeah.
brains and our bodies don't do that biologically or physiologically or psychologically. There was lots of ologies in that sentence there.
Ology. You've got an
Um,
ology.
the study of. Um, so yeah, we put timestamps on everything as a society. Our bodies don't. So you might not. I certainly was not ready for university at 18. I mean, I put a LinkedIn post on an A-level results day on Thursday. I bombed my A-levels
I
beyond
noticed that. And yet,
all shadow of a
I've never
doubt.
had those conversations with you. And yet, who knew? Here you are, CEO now of, a very successful commercial organization. You're a, board director on a not-for-profit. You're a very successful mum, wife, dog mum. all those kind of things. And I suppose it's too flippant to say actually A-level grades don't matter, but there must have been a period for you where you thought, oh, what
That
now?
was awful, absolutely awful. I'm walking through my front door, and there'll be people listening to this that have done this exact thing this week, walking through my front door as the kind of superstar head girl that I was at school. And my A-levels was the first thing I'd actually ever really kind of, quote unquote, failed. So walking through my front door and saying to my parents, "Oh, those two A's and a B I should have got." Well, I was miles off, and didn't get into my university placement, and had to sit in clearing for, well, you could do it for days and days back then. I know you've got minutes now to get through clearing, but I should have stopped. I should have not gone to university. I should have paused. I should have taken a breath. I should have had a year out, gone and done some work, earned some money, figured some things out, got my head into a bit of a shape. But I didn't. I just thought, well, this is what I'm supposed to do at 18. This is what's expected. I'll go to uni. And I wasn't ill then. Obviously everyone knows my illness developed decades later. Um, so I do wonder, how it must feel if you've got this expectation on yourself and from others that this is the pattern you should follow, and you're also struggling with the depths of an eating disorder. I mean, you were a similar sort of period of time, weren't you, where it was coming about for yourself?
Yeah, it was. And I look back and I think, cool, were there the signs there? And I'm very fortunate in that respect in terms of kind of, what was that grade day like for me? I can remember my dad, dropping me off in the car park of sixth form and going in and getting my envelope of results. And I got an ABBA, I got an ABA, and I did incredibly well. And I got my first choice university to go and study the prestigious as was then journalism course that I really wanted to study. But I was in a gloomy place, I think. And I'm kind of, I'm sharing this with you, the podcast audience, trying to think it over in my mind. But I was not a happy young woman. I had been terribly bullied and had experienced some real sort of self-esteem issues for a significant period of time, which I'd layered upon layer. I'd had a few traumatic incidents in that sort of 9 months prior to wanting to go, or but before what would then become the time to move on to university. And I think any psychologist now, if I wrote those things on paper and said, this is what happened to me in that 9 months before I went to university, would have said, what the hell were you thinking, adding another bloody massive sea change into your world? But I had what we often talk about, how people with eating disorders can have those predispositions. And I'm really, really careful that generalizations just make people really unhappy. We all know that they happen at any age and stage, but I probably am one that you would consider to be more of a typical person who had a predisposition to go that route, in that I was a massive people pleaser, I was a perfectionist, I was a high achiever, all those kind of things, but terribly also low self-esteem, added to which trauma, etc. And I think all I knew was it'll be okay when. So I was trying to tell myself in my 18-year-old head, life is pretty shit, isn't it? And okay, here's my door key out of the life that I have now. If I just go to university, it'll all get magically better. This trauma and this pain that I feel inside me will go away because I'll be validating myself and identifying as Debbie, a student, Debbie that's going to be a future journalist, Debbie that no longer lives with her family, no longer lives within this small area where these traumatic events and incidences have happened. And so at the time when, going back to what we said very early about drawing breath, at the time when I should have been drawing breath, I upped stakes. I went to university. Now, we're not talking about me traveling to the other side of the world. It was kind of 4.5 hour car journey. But I threw myself into my university life at a time when somebody could have done with giving me a bit of a mummy hug and saying, is this really what's right for you? So if you ask me hand on heart, would I do the same again? I'd say no. No, I wouldn't. But that's hindsight. That's hindsight because I
Yeah.
also know that the career that I chose to do could just have easily been, an exemplary career by going straight into that profession. And I think at the time there was I don't know, you and I went same sort of year, didn't we? So I think maybe there was a real drive to make young people like you and I, who perhaps weren't from kind of, really particularly high income families and all that kind of thing, to encourage us to reach for the stars, go to university, have higher education, grants were available, all that kind of thing. So I wanted to be first in the family for, a long, long time to go to university. I did that. I ticked that box. But it did come at a shocking cost to me in terms of my emotional and mental health. And it was within you know, maybe 6 to 9 months of being in that university environment that my eating disorder really, set hold. Um, and
Mine
I,
was, sorry, I was just gonna, my like I said, my reflection of I should have stayed back. I should have taken some time off because of not being ready. And, clearly academically I wasn't as strong as I thought I was. But mine was the opposite, because when I got there, it was flipping great. I had a wonderful time. Manchester Met was just an absolute ball. And I learned tons of skills that I never would have learned if I'd stayed at home for those 3 years, still in my
yeah,
mum and dad's house. Um, so it has both. Everything's got two sides of every coin, aren't there? There's always, the what it's, the what's maybes, but like you always say, it's about making sure that it is right for you at the time that you're doing it. And if
yeah,
you are really focusing on recovery, and you know that recovery is your primary aim, then all credit to, and 100% respect to anybody who chooses not to do the thing. It doesn't need to be university, does it? It can be uni,
no,
it could be getting that job, it could be moving house, it could be getting married, it could be starting a family. All credit to anyone that does take that big pause and says, actually, at the moment, it's recovery that's important for me, and the other things will come once I'm well and I'm feeling stronger.
God, you don't think we're going to be guilty of creating this episode and then someone writing to us and saying, do you know, I was due to get married the day after I
Yeah.
had your episode, and I
Oh yeah,
decided to
scrap that
say
one.
no.
Scrap that one. If you're going about to cancel your wedding, maybe speak to your partner beforehand.
Or
Don't just not turn up.
make sure you can get a refund on your wedding dress and your engagement ring. But you're absolutely
Oh,
right. There
blimey.
will be people out there just considering all sorts of journeys and potentials in life. Hello, dogs. That must be what we can hear in the background. So Sarah's just put herself on mute briefly. Um, it was inevitable that we were going to have the dogs chipping in at some point. But I think it is a reminder that wherever you are in your own life, there is those kind of times when you need to check in. Who are you validating against? So I will always say I have been too externally validating, sought the views and opinions of other people to the cost of myself. So I think if I would say any lesson from what I've been through is perhaps kind of think about really just checking in intuitively. And I know not everyone's comfortable with the idea of intuition being the be all and end all, but just check in with yourself sometimes and say, am I doing what feels right for me? Even if it's bloody uncomfortable, you know, it's not necessarily the right thing to cling to the comfort zone. And also, actually, if I'm a little bit unsure, what could I learn by going this route as opposed to the staying with this other route? So yeah, really, really important opportunity. And I'm sure many people will be going through that stage at the moment,
I
be
was
they
I was listening to
academic.
something the other day about making a list of the challenging or difficult or uncomfortable conversations that you're avoiding having,
Oh,
and just kind of try and listen. I know I tried. It was a bit of a, it took me back, I'll be honest. But I tried to list them. And actually, it was a really interesting thing to do, because in amongst all of that, when you look at it on paper, there was some that you just think, well, that's not challenging. I've just made that in my head. I've made that in my head something that's way more challenging, more difficult than it actually is going to be. So there was about 3 or 4 things. I literally got off my seat and I went and found that person and said, "Oh, can I just talk to you about blah blah blah?" And it was like as simple as that.
oh, how
But that
cathartic.
process of, yeah, it was. There was some on there that I keep avoiding. They're still on the list, and I'm like, I'll have to be brave at some point. But it's just sometimes just having a real think, and people surprise you, don't they? People surprise you with their responses. We ruminate, especially if we're struggling with our mental health, and we project and we assume the worst and catastrophize and all of those things that we learn in
Oh,
therapy. And sometimes the outcome isn't as difficult as we assume it might be.
No,
So yeah,
and
that's such
I
a good
think,
thing.
reflecting on what you've just said there, the other thing is about if you're listening to this and you're not somebody who's going through an eating disorder, but instead is someone who is concerned about someone or is supporting someone, actually sometimes the brave but really helpful thing to do is to, come alongside that person and say, is there anything you want to talk to me about? How can I help you? Do we
Mhm.
need a conversation? How can I help you move forward from where you might be right now? And you might get short shrift, but you might also help that person just to relieve that. I often call it like a bubble in the throat where
Yeah.
you'd love to be able to release and talk to someone, but until they step forward and kind of almost encourage you to release, you can't do it. You can't go up and tap that person on the shoulder and say, "Help me, I really need something."
And
Um,
that initial reaction of that person is quite likely, let's be honest, quite likely to be quite in that effect mode of how we communicate, in the sense that they might be angry, they might be quite emotive, it might be fueled, it might be short, it might be sharp. But the fact that you've had that conversation and you've kind of opened that door, for want of a better phrase, they'll have the initial reaction, they then will go away, and there will be a huge sense of relief knowing that they can come back. You know
yeah,
that thing you mentioned to me about yesterday. I've been thinking about it overnight, and yeah, I would really appreciate a chat if you've still got time. So don't be put off by that initial reaction that is probably going to be quite fueled and emotive, because that person does know that you're then available.
yeah.
Um, and hope, fingers crossed, they will come back to you when they're feeling calmer.
And it is really difficult, isn't it, when somebody has something as vicious as an eating disorder can be, to know when to open up a conversation with someone where you fear that you might get that level of hostility, or as we all know, eating disorders create a lot of defensiveness and secrecy, and you could say the word lying, and that's tough on parents, carers, partners, but just remember that by nudging at the door, and it might be days later, weeks later, months later, but what you've said there is, I am here. I'm here when it's right for you. I'm here. Push at the door and have a conversation with me. And that is the gentlest, but really the most helpful thing you can do, rather than making it about a barnstorming conversation that is just too aggressive and doesn't help anybody.
And potentially then, because we are in this transitional period, and I know we have parents listening to this, that it is the right time to then start that new academic year with a conversation with the right person in school, college, or uni on behalf of your loved one, with them, preferably. But if not with them, then at least on behalf with them, especially obviously if they're a younger child, because it's just it's a good beginning. It's a good beginning,
Yeah.
to use it as that, and to have those conversations with school, and don't be put off if they say they're busy. Just keep going back and going back. I talk frequently about a time when I sat in, not her current school. My daughter goes to an amazing school now, but a previous school, and I just sat in the reception and I was like, I'm just going to sit here and get my laptop out until someone can speak to me. And I didn't cause a fuss, and I didn't argue, and I wasn't mean. I just wasn't moving.
I
so,
love that. I
so
mean,
like
I
just
would have been scared if I was the,
oh,
office secretary. I'd have been, Mrs. Ledger's been sitting out there a while. I think we
she's
should
been an
see
hour.
her.
Well, there was two things to that. I was absolutely petrified in my tummy, and then I got my laptop out my bag, realised I had no charge, so I had to pretend to type for half an hour.
Banging the keys, making it look like you were a rapid
To
typer.
do, I've got nothing to do. But
Uh,
again, it's not about creating a fuss. It's just about being persistent enough, and then supportive of the school afterwards or the college afterwards, because they will ultimately help your child. It's just sometimes, you've got to just make people listen sometimes, and you don't need to do that aggressively. And our listeners wouldn't be aggressive. Um, but yeah, it's a good time to have those conversations with school and college if you're a parent or a carer.
Yeah, and I mean, it gives us an opportunity to have a bit of a plug, doesn't it? You and I have double-headed to go and visit some schools and do some workshops with teachers. And I would say, I mean, obviously, when they reach out to us and ask us to come in, that means in a way they're already receptive, and they accept that they may have an issue, or at least that they want to explore it as a potential to be an issue around eating disorders. I would say, if you're one of those parents where you don't feel that the school your child goes to or is going to has quite the right record or supportive approach around eating disorders, it's worth saying to them, have you heard of this organization, Wednesday Child? Or even, I'm not going to kind of use this as a sole advert for Wednesday Child. I don't care if you say, have you heard about this organization called B, or whoever else it might be. Let that school know that you are aware that eating disorders is something that is a very real and important topic that needs to be handled sensitively across the various ages and stages of schooling, right up to and including college and university. And you might nudge a conversation in the staff room. You might trigger somebody to go away and chat to, another kind of colleague or person in pastoral care that hasn't done anything with it to date. And actually, if like grumpy Mrs. Ledger that wants to sit and wait until she gets in, if you feel like you don't get the response you want, then reach out to us and say, actually, can you contact this school? Because I'm not too proud to contact a school and say, we've heard, or we would really love to help you. Can we come and see you? So I would say use us as the conduit if that's a conversation you would like to start, because what better time to do it than at the start of an autumn term, if there are sort of various things that are on the radar for teachers to be considering by way of professional development. I would say they couldn't do wrong other than to look at something as important in mental health as this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just don't be afraid to ask. And if you're the person in the college or the school, you also don't be afraid to ask. There are people designated to support folks when they're feeling like they need someone to talk to, and or they just feel like they've got to get something off their chest. You don't have to go through to the whole disclosure, but you can talk. That's the whole point. That's one of the whole points, that there are people are in that school. So if talking to a loved one or a carer at home's too challenging at the moment, then use another adult that you trust in school. You have to acknowledge and understand that that adult in school can't keep that sort of thing private and secret. It's against the law. They have to support you and back by sharing and with the right people again. But no, talk to other people, adults, grown-ups. Talking to your peers is great, but actually you sometimes need someone who's just got a few decades on you to steer you in a more productive direction, let's say. And then if you're an adult, you just need to talk to anybody that you can.
Yeah.
Absolutely anybody that you can.
Yeah, I think it's so important to remember that silence is like a poison that just grows and grows and grows inside you until it leaches out of every pore. So whoever it is you choose to speak to, and really, if initially you're so petrified of actually verbalizing it to someone, someone as a real being that you can trust, start by journaling, start by chatting to the dog on the dog walk, whatever it is, but start to get it out, because I do believe it makes you sicker and sicker to push down this emotional pain and distress. And God knows I say that from a place of somebody who did it for a long, long time. Those early years of university, I just stifled and stifled because I was so desperate to be the perfect one, to be the uncomplaining, successful, fulfilling my parents' dreams. And I pushed it down and pushed it down and pushed it down. And it made me so sick. And you won't have had to have listened to many of our podcasts to know that we so often talk about early intervention being vital to an eating disorder, because it sets in the rot so damn early. And the longer you allow that toxin to grow inside you, it just manifests in a way that makes you doubt everything about your own existence, your relationships with others, your capabilities. Everything is changed and challenged. So really, if you feel yourself starting to withdraw, silencing yourself, deafening what you really think and feel, speak up. If you can't do that to someone you know and love, and you're afraid of your own kind of, you wanting to preserve your anonymity, well, that's just one more reason then someone like us is here, because you can have that conversation with us if you want. If you reach out and say, I realize that I don't want friends or family to know about this at the moment. I'm seen as successful student or competent wife and mother. I'm seen as the clever chief executive of this big thriving business, but I have an eating disorder and I need to talk to someone about it before it gets worse. Then an organization like us is that non-judgmental space. We will do that. If you say what's going to help you best is a befriending relationship where someone can check in with you, we can do that. And be aware that befriending from someone like Sarah and I can be a bit hard. But honesty's good.
I wouldn't say hard. I'd
Okay,
say
okay. What would you
productive.
say? Oh, productive. Okay,
Productive.
okay. Yeah. Productive.
Recovery focused.
Yes, entirely recovery focused. It's just not soft and gentle either.
No, it's not. But don't let that put you off, because
No,
that's
not
so
at all.
super important. It's
And
so
in
important to
fact,
just cut through the rubbish.
it so is. In fact, ahead of this episode, earlier in the week, I was chatting to someone I've been a long-term befriender with, and she's doing so well now. I'm so impressed. And
Oh,
I said to her,
great.
how do you fancy coming on the pod with Sarah and I and sharing a little bit about your befriending journey? And I was slightly worried she was going to say, what? And tell people really how awful you were at times of me and how you told me I'd got to do this and not do that. But she's going to come on and
Oh,
talk
fun.
about how I used to like rage against her for staying stuck on 40 sip and being afraid and all those kind of things. So
40 sip, there's a word I haven't heard for a
yeah,
while.
I used to consider it like a swear word, and so every time she brought it up, and she said, "It's okay, Debbie, because I've had to put 40 sip." What?
Yeah, yeah. Oh
Bless her.
no.
It's always an age and a stage, you know. They have a purpose, don't
There's
they?
a reason, exactly. They've got their place, they've got their purpose. There's a reason that they exist, but you don't exist for them, I suppose, is what
Yeah,
I would
exactly
kind
that.
of think.
Well, it's been great to be back in the world of the Wednesday's Child community with the podcast. So we will love and leave you for now, but please just remember, I did promise I would reference the email address again at the end of the episode. So if you want to get in touch, it's hello@wednesdayschild.co.uk. If you particularly want to have a moan at me, like, directly, you can always email Debbie@wednesdayschild.co.uk. There's no running away from that. And Debbie is DEBBIE. No Y. Somebody was telling me they were trying to get hold of me and using Y. I think it's less common, but anyway.
I've never heard Debbie with a Y.
Have you not? That's because you
No.
only ever call me Debs.
Debs. And other things, but we can't say what else I call you. Be
No, we won't. We'll
impolite.
keep those out. Well, it's been great to be back. Please do stay in touch, and we promise you are not going to have to wait so long for the next episode. We'll just
We've
stick to that.
breathed, we've taken our moment in time, and now we're back in the land
Yeah.
of Wednesday's child living, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
and do check us out on socials because we're going to share some pictures from Sarah's
Puppies.
wonderful breed of puppies. All right, take care for now. Stay focused on recovery. It's been lovely being back with you. You have been listening to the Wednesday's Child podcast.